XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/XSWD.
This stream is powered by Wirecast, a powerful multi-input switching and graphics solution for live streaming in any situation. Okay, welcome everyone to Pro V Live. I am joined once again by Ollie Kenchington. How are you today, Ollie?
I'm very well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am doing all right. Few techie problems before we got started, but all sorted now, hopefully. It's worth pointing out for people watching it, the last stream that I did have quite a few technical problems with things like lip sync and stuff like that. So I am trying... That doesn't help, Ollie. That doesn't help. So I am trying a different encoding method to see if that makes any difference, because I had tried something new beforehand. Although as we go live, I noticed that my delay is a little bit. So basically what I'm saying is that as you all are watching it, if you are spotting any major lip sync problems or anything like that, please do let me know, because it can be sometimes very difficult to spot this when you're operating and hosting it yourself. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the techie problems that keep me up at night, are we, Ollie? We're here to talk about your project. So what project are we talking about today?
So yeah, it was interesting sort of trying to pick projects to break down. There's obviously quite a big choice going back through the archives, but this one really stood out to me for a couple of reasons. So it's a promotional, well, technically it's a brand documentary. So it's a documentary style promotional film for one of our clients, the University of the West of England, or UWE Bristol for short. And it's promoting their mental health nursing degree. So it's a traditional corporate in the sense that we are promoting a product, in this case a degree course that they're trying to increase recruitment for.
So the goal of the video, the aim of the corporate video, is to get people to sort of sign up for the course and enroll.
Indeed. Yeah, it's easy to forget with higher education, but it is a business in many senses, and they are their recruitment and people who sign up to their courses and come to the university versus going on other courses and other universities obviously directly impacts their income streams, just like any business. So they're actually a very marketing savvy university. They have something like 60 or 70 different people who work just in their marketing team alone. So they're very used to using all kinds of different creative media and digital media to promote various aspects of the university, and they thankfully chose us and video as the mechanism for promoting and encouraging recruitment onto this particular course. And this is part of a series, actually. So we've been doing a whole series. We're meant to do another one early this year, which obviously is going to be pushed back. But this is part of a series of documentary style promotional videos that were promoting various different aspects of their health related degrees. So we've actually already done in previous years occupational therapy, physiotherapy, radiotherapy, adult nursing. So this is just the latest in a run.
So I've got the film here which we can play. Before, is there anything we want to explain about it or go over about it before we watch it?
I think it's probably best to see it with fresh eyes, actually, and then we'll pick it apart afterwards. But we'll just let it kind of play out. It's obviously being a documentary style, a brand documentary. If you're not familiar with that type of style of corporate video, is a bit longer. So I think it's 4 minutes.
It's 4 minutes, 4 minutes,
so, which is a marathon in these modern times. But I think
they signed up for an hour stream, so they should be able to sit through 4 minutes of the thing we're talking about.
Otherwise, if they can't, I've failed.
Okay, let's give it a watch.
Throughout secondary school, I was part of a very, very toxic group of people. I always had something to prove. I couldn't just be myself. I always had to wear a mask. And that was a massive contributor, really, to my mental health issues. I was basically hiding who I was, and that made me extremely depressed. No one really noticed what was going on until it kind of hit crisis point, really. I was hospitalised for a month until I was sent to a psychiatric unit. I found it very, very difficult to actually talk about how I felt. Having to then talk to someone who I don't even know was extremely difficult.
Working in mental health nursing, we quite often deal with people in their darkest moments, but we're trying to be the light that comes in and sort of like anchors people out of that.
How I knew I was starting to get better was when the things that used to really, really upset me, I didn't care about them anymore.
I went to a pub on a Sunday afternoon. A man came over to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and he was carrying a baby in his arms, and he said, "If you hadn't worked with my wife, then I wouldn't be with this baby now." So a lot of stuff that we're going to be doing today is filling out forms. That's powerful stuff, and makes it worth it. Makes some of those challenges worth it, at least, yeah.
Thank you, James. So James has done a great job there of talking to a service user in their house for the first time.
I'm James Marlow. I'm a third-year mental health nursing student studying at UWE Bristol.
So thank you, James and Amber.
I came into mental health after spending years working in advertising, sales and accounts. It's certainly challenging trying to sort of get into academia when you haven't ever had a go at it before and starting to do that when you're 40. But it's great. It's a really infusing and enriching experience to go through. I chose to study at UWE Bristol because they had such close links with the mental health nursing trusts in the area. The placements that you're on are really wide and diverse. It's all here and it's all available to get into. It's brilliant.
Since 2016, I've been coming to UWE Bristol to talk about my experiences to the mental health students.
There's been a number of times when service users have come in and sort of facilitated groups. It's powerful stuff to see. It's really moving to see someone's journey in their own words. I've been supported throughout my degree course here by the staff. I've got a great personal tutor, Jane. She's been there and done it, and she knows what you're taking home with you quite often. Because we're all in that mental health field, it's all about sort of counselling and sort of debriefing each other through those periods. So I've found it very supportive here.
I'm 17 years old. Our generation is meant to live until we're 100. What doesn't kill you does make you stronger. I've got all of my life ahead of me still.
Okay, I think that is a really lovely little piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's certainly a lot that we can break down and use in that to talk about a variety of different bits. I mean, there's the type of film as a start. Like you said, it's a very documentary style sort of brand film, but for a university, it really tells a story. And I think thinking of it as a mini documentary or a mini doc is a really nice way to think about it.
I think it helps, yeah, absolutely, with the messaging for it, which all boils down to, and this is where we sort of began with the brief, which is to illustrate to people who are considering that university. One would presume that they're already considering a career in mental health nursing prior to deciding which university they're actually going to study that at.
Sure. Yep.
And that viewer understanding what they consider to be a crucial element of the courses that they offer, which is that they are far more hands-on and real-world in terms of the amount of placements that they do than other universities. And that was really where we began, not just with this film, but as I say, this is I think the fifth in a series we started probably 3 or 4 years ago. So
yeah, wow.
Exactly. And I think it's been really nice actually to have the opportunity to develop it. So this all began, the first one we did was an adult nursing one. And the whole idea of there being a twist, and it was far more opaque, basically. So the basic concept was that to convey just how professional and experienced their health students are by the time they've graduated, due to the amount of placements and interaction with external kind of relevant bodies and hospitals and so on, they wanted to shoot it in a very much obviously documentary style. In fact, the original goal was to make it look as closely as possible as 24 Hours in A&E. So we did a lot of research watching that show to figure out what visually makes that show look like that show. So I'll talk more about that when I talk about the interviews later. And so we did it in a far more obvious way that first time. And we one of the things that they have for their adult nursing is they have a full-blown hospital ward with the proper beds, and they have these mannequins that are extraordinarily expensive that can simulate blood pressure and pulse, and they can take bloods from them. It's crazy how realistic it is. And they have like a control booth with two-way glass so they can observe the students on this mock-up ward, and they can send certain information to certain screens so they can make, patient 3's blood pressure suddenly spike. It's incredible, really. So that first film, we really, really heavily played on that and made made you think that you were watching an episode of 24 Hours in A&E, and then there's a big reveal when you realise that it's a mannequin, so the whole first half you don't see the face. We even blur them out to make it look like we're protecting their privacy. So there's this very obvious twist in it, and that has carried forwards into the other ones, but in a far more subtle way. So as we've gone through making these, it's become more of a subtle thing, but it's no less useful at conveying to the viewer that these people you would presume are practicing professionals because of their, the anecdotes. For example, in this one, the anecdotes that James is giving about someone coming up to him in the pub and saying that I wouldn't be here, baby wouldn't be here now. All of that is they're anecdotes based on his time on placements. He's a third year, or was a third year when we filmed it, so he would have spent right from his first year, he would have gone on multiple placements. That probably would have been about his 6th placement by that point. And so those anecdotes are all real. So when you decide to kind of slightly play with the medium and have a twist in there has to be, to my mind, there has to be a really good reason for that. And I think it has to be handled in quite a delicate way and not... As I say, with the first one, it was a bit opaque. So
this one's a bit more subtle.
Yes, yeah.
At what point in the process, at what point with working with the client and all the rest of it, did the decision to do that come up? Was it there right from the beginning, or was it after you started maybe doing some test interviews and getting a gauge for some of those anecdotes? Or...
It's interesting. I think, as I say, they have a very experienced marketing team. And when we first started this and sat down together and discussed the brief for that first one, I remember it was actually them who said, we want to make this look like 24 Hours in A&E, to make it seem like people are watching a TV show. And it was all very much based around this twist. And I think what's happened is over the time that we've developed them, and gone through subsequent different marketing people as well. I mean, people have come and gone from the organization, and the people that I work with now in their marketing team aren't the same people that first came up with this idea. But so this is why I think it's morphed, and thankfully, to my mind, and with a little bit of kind of input from us, has become more of a subtle tool, and more of a what we would think of more as a brand documentary rather than a mock documentary. It was almost, or was purely in the first instance. But that original idea for the 24 Hours in A&E came from them, because I'd never seen the show. And so that's why it started off on that footing. But I think it's really useful because it's meant, as we've subsequently gone through the other ones, as with this one, you have that opportunity to just let it sort of subtly sit there. I don't want it to be like a big da-da kind of twist like it was in that first time where someone
absolutely not.
The curtain and it's a mannequin. So I think it's really nice that it allows it just to play out, and
it's a more subtle play on the watcher's expectations. I mean, for the first minute or so of that, they're thinking, okay, great, this is a lady who's been helped significantly by the process, and here's the person that helped her, and that's what the interview is. And then the reveal being that he is a student makes it very, I think, is really clever from a promotional point of view, because it makes it so that if the viewer sitting at home is someone wanting to get into this profession, it makes the course all of a sudden and the achievements of the people all of a sudden very, very approachable, because it means, oh, okay, I see. I thought he was up here on this pedestal, but actually he's at this level that I'm trying to get to right now. He's not 3 levels ahead of me. He's only 1 level ahead of me, and I could get there very easily. So I think that's really powerful.
I think that's helped by the fact he's a mature student as well.
That is that.
That also feeds into your expectation. Although actually, that's the first time we've used a mature student in that role, as it were. I think it's also important to mention that because of what we were planning on doing, it was very, very important to both the client and me that we didn't lie at any point. So
sure,
we want it to all be authentic. When you realize, oh, he's a student, I didn't want someone going back through the film and go, oh, well, what did they do to trick me?
Yeah.
If you do look at it multiple times, you'll realize he's never lying. He's never making up anything. We haven't fed him a script at all.
Yep.
Even the scenes where he's in the simulation house and he's talking to the girl who it turns out to be one of his cohort, he's wearing an NHS lanyard, and that again isn't to trip people up. That is genuinely his lanyard that he wears when he's on placements. That is actually his. So I think all of that allows us, also the fact that they have facilities like simulation wards and simulation houses. When we filmed the occupational therapy and physiotherapy ones, we were in a house that they have on the grounds, which they use as a simulation house. So occupational therapists who are going into, we based it around a lady who had a stroke, and she had to relearn to kind of dress herself. She's paralyzed in one arm, so getting in and out of the bath. And we see the student, although at that point we think that they're a professional, showing her how to get into the bath, and we're in the simulation house that they have on the ground. So again, we're very actually quite detail oriented around the ideas of what we're showing aren't at any point lies. And this one was particularly interesting from that point of view because we actually struggled. It took about a year to get this film made, and mostly that was because whereas with the other ones, it was a simple case of let's pick the best student to interview and let's pick a relevant service user, as they call them, who is coming in and talking to the students. In this case, the service users that they were getting to come in weren't happy about being on camera talking about obviously such a personal thing, although they were happy going in and talking to the university students about it one-on-one. That's quite different from, captured on film and put up on a website and there for everyone to see all around the globe. So we actually went through about 2 or 3 different people who either initially said yes and then sort of thought about it and changed their minds, or were just struggling to find someone to play that role, which was unexpected because with all of the previous ones, it was dead simple. It was like, oh, here's this lady who's previously had a stroke, used occupational therapy. She comes in and talks to the students. She's more than happy to do that on camera. Job done. There was actually nearly a year of us trying to find someone who was happy to be on camera, and when we finally found the girl who's in this film, it was a huge relief that we can actually carry on filming it. But we did talk at one point about getting an actor and creating a script for them, and we were dangerously close to having to do that. But there was a very strong desire to not do that because it would have essentially broken that fundamental rule of not deceiving the viewer at any point.
Yeah, it does break down a little bit of some of the trust, doesn't it? Especially when you're dealing with such a delicate subject.
And I think it would come across as well. I mean, Frankie, the girl who's in it, at the time she was only 17, and a huge amount of bravery to be on camera, being recorded, talking about something so personal. But it was once there's that kind of reveal and you realize that James is a student. Another nice thing is the way that we treat the service user, so Frankie in this case, by then reintegrating them into the story. It could have been quite easy for us to just hear from the service user, hear from this student, and then once we know they're a student, just kind of fall back straight into this university's great, come here. But I thought it was actually narratively, you needed that kind of that third act. You needed that part where you realize, well, how is she then related to him then? Because if she isn't his patient,
was she just a sad person? Why on earth? What?
Just grabbed someone
exactly?
And just exploited them for the promotion. No, exactly.
She has to be involved in the story. Absolutely.
Yeah. So seeing her talking to the class and sharing her story, that's something that they do. And they regularly get people to do that so that the students can connect the practice and the theory behind what they're learning with the human element of it, the actual impact on a real person. So that was really relevant, and that's something that isn't there in the very first film we did in the adult nursing one, because that was all about we're tricking you into thinking you're watching 24 Hours in A&E.
Yeah.
So once we got past that first film, and so from the second film onwards, we came up with this idea of having a service user, and that was the element of we think we're watching a documentary, and when we're not, we realize that the service user is in fact not their patient, but someone who comes in and talks to them on the course. So that was something actually only introduced after the first film that we made.
So we'll go through in a minute and break down each scene bit by bit, and so that we can talk in a bit more detail about each of the setups, each of the interview setups, things like that, from a more of a production point of view. But before we did that, do we want to cover a little bit in terms of what equipment you used for this?
Yeah. So we shot this primarily on the C200. It's all MP4, the internal MP4 8-bit codec, and it's not shot raw. We also used the EOS R as a B cam on a gimbal, and in fact we shot this, when was it, November 2018, I think, and it went up at the end of 2019, to end of 2018, beginning of 2019. It was up on their pages, so it's a little over a year ago that it went up. And we'd only just got the EOS R at that point. So, and in fact, we'd only just got the gimbal that we were using the EOS R on as well. So there was some new equipment that we were testing out for the first time, which in fact led to some issues that we had, not with the camera, but with the gimbal. The gimbal that we had purchased had a fault with it, which we couldn't see on our 5-inch monitor whilst we were filming the scene. So there's a whole swathe of stuff that we filmed with Jane, the lecturer, and James meeting in the corridor and chatting in the corridor, which is meant to go with the stuff where he's talking about the support that he gets from his tutors.
Gotcha.
And it was only when we got back and looked at it on the big screen, we realized there was a very slight shake. It would every now and again just jerk, which was massively distracting. And there was a fault with it, and we obviously got it swapped out and replaced very quickly. But at the point where we were filming that, we didn't realize. Thankfully, most of it was shot on the C200, so it wasn't too much of an issue, but it did slightly change our plans. So the C200 is our main camera. That's why we were using it. And it actually played a really crucial role, I think, probably more than any other type of camera that we could have been using at the time, due to the face tracking autofocus. And because of the delicate nature of the interviews, and the fact that we have a very specific story that we're trying to tell, but as I said a while ago, we're not putting a script in their hands. We're not trying to feed them lines. The whole thing relies on us asking a certain question in the interview that we hope will elicit a certain answer that fits our narrative. And that's one of the things that I think is quite enjoyable. It's also quite challenging about corporate films, but I enjoyed that. So I like to be the one interviewing, but we also didn't have a big enough budget to have, separate camera operators. And we also didn't think it was very appropriate to have a big crew as well. So it was literally just me, our producer Daisy, and our sound recordist Alex, who were there and filmed and the whole project. So I shot and edited it. And so with those interviews, because of the dual pixel autofocus and the face tracking being so reliable, I was able to actually set up the camera, light it, and then just sit next to the camera and interview, or in James's case, sit behind the camera and interview him, because he's done as a piece to camera, he's central, and not have to worry about losing focus. So I think both of them, but definitely James, are shot with the lens I'm using now. In fact, the 85mm f1.4, and it was at 1.4, so we wanted that lovely separation. And partly that's because we're trying to create a sense of him being in a hospital when in fact he's not. So he's in one of the teaching spaces, but we've deliberately framed it so that there's a lot of white, and any colors that are there are blue, and there's sort of metallics as well. We actually deliberately moved a metal framed trolley into the background of his shot to get some specular highlights and get a sense of kind of clinicalness about it, to just like taps and disposable paper towels and stuff, and they're just in the background of the classroom. But with that very shallow depth of field with the 85mm, it allows you to kind of create more of a general kind of palette and sense that this is a clinical setting, a hospital or something like that, and which is partly what leads you into thinking that he's a doctor or a nurse at this point.
Did you use any lighting equipment for those sort of interviews? Or
We
any
did.
B-roll?
We just had a key. So I think we've got some BTS of the spaces that we shot them in, and the lighting was. I was going to say tricky. I mean, it actually wasn't. It was really quite easy to manage in the end. But the spaces where we interviewed both of them, they're very tall roof lights, which let in a lot of daylight. So we were in a mixed environment, and so we had to kind of be careful about how we were managing that. That mainly came down to just turning all the artificial lights off, measuring the ambient daylight temperature that we were getting just before we rolled, and then tuning our bicolored LED lights to match that. And I think with James's one, I also put a LED down at the far end of the room. So I moved that trolley in that I mentioned, that metal trolley, and then just smashed a light into the side of it as a kicker, just to kind of get some pings off it and get some interesting specular highlights, as I said, in the background to give a sense of metallic materials.
Well, let's take a look at some of that, shall we? So if we head over to the laptop screen like that. So I noticed you entered this into a film festival, actually.
Yes. So last year we won Brand Film Festival in their brand, brand documentary category. Okay. Yeah, which was a huge honour, particularly given the tiny crew and tiny budget that we had.
Yeah.
When I went to the festival to collect the awards, the people who were also winning alongside us were absolutely huge, London-based agencies. And there's little old country bumpkin me. People were picking up their awards for I remember the Progress Film Company won for a half-hour documentary about the history of Land Rover that I think was, it was like a TV length doc that they had made, and when they went up to collect their award, there was about 20 of them collecting it. And, it was great because all of the other people that were winning for very, very expensive, big name projects for people like Heineken and Google had one of the films that were in there, Volvo. Yeah, and then obviously UWE aren't a household name.
No.
And we're a tiny sort of production company, but winning alongside
shows the
them
importance of story.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think it was really, we've always had very good quality clients, and I've always been happy with the output we're putting out and the trajectory that we're taking as a business. But that was really nice affirmation that we were producing content that was completely separate to us on our own egos and our own kind of reflection. Someone else, and a very respected festival, the Brand Film Festival London and Brand Film Festival New York are one of the the better ones. And the types of companies that win those awards are winning as very notable production companies with very notable projects. So it was great because it made me realise that we are going about this the right way. We are serving our customers as well as we tell them we are.
Okay, so do you want to talk us through the sort of the process behind some of these openings? So it starts with a series of sort of close-ups of her getting ready for her day, if you like.
And that's quite important that they're close, because we wanted to visually. So when we're planning for films like this, the narrative and the main story elements come from the dialogue from the interview, but we need to create then a secondary narrative strand that's entirely visual that sits alongside that. So you're seeing this visual narrative whilst you're hearing Frankie talk about her her lowest point in her life. We needed visuals that we could run as as a B-roll segment. So we're always, when we're shooting B-roll, we're not just collecting pretty shots. We're sequencing, we're storyboarding and sequencing shots that work to visually back up those elements within the story. So we always knew we'd be asking her about her problems. We always knew that wasn't going to be a happy story, but we didn't know exactly what she was going to say. And so we needed to storyboard a sequence that kind of reflected that without being cliched. We didn't want any her sat at a window with raindrops pouring down outside and horrible sort of grey clouds coming over. So we actually had the idea of doing something quite different and almost the exact opposite. So she's actually very happy and smiley throughout most of the opening sequence. It's very warm colours, which typically you wouldn't associate with something sort of dour. You would normally want to use cool colours to kind of reflect that. So the nice warm colours, the happy colours, and the end of this sequence is her walking away with a big smile on her face through the woods. And she says, the moment where I knew I was getting better, because it was when I knew I just didn't care about the same things that were worrying me before. So what we did instead to kind of convey the transition from a dark place to a happy place was we used our framing. So when she's getting ready for this walk, we're very deliberately only sort of filming these extreme close-ups and these little snapshots of the process of getting on this coat. And of course, she's just going for a walk, but the coat's kind of a metaphor for building up defenses against the outside world and kind of withdrawing into herself. So that's the thought process behind the shot types that we're using at the start there.
Gotcha. So almost immediately, there was only a couple of those quite quick fire shots of her getting clothes on. And then that B-roll sequence is interrupted by her and by us seeing her actual interview.
Yeah, so one of the powerful things in editing, to my mind, is when you reveal the interviewee, when you actually see that interview. When you've got lots of really nicely storyboarded B-roll sequences like we had, I mean, we shot more than enough B-roll to just cover the whole thing. We don't have to see her or him at any point, obviously. So the points where you choose to come back to them are the points where you're basically saying to the audience, this is crucial. This is the absolute kind of crux of what this bit of dialogue you've been hearing is about. And it's great to use those moments to emphasize certain key moments in the interview. And it's something that actually, people do all the time. You see politicians doing it, and anyone who's a kind of a media trained orator. It's the teacher syndrome. I don't know if you have this, Carl, where someone's talking and then they go quiet, and it makes you look up. It makes you focus suddenly, because we have this kind of like when we were kids at school, like you're drawing on the desk or filling in a note for
something's happened which I'm not aware of. What's going on?
You suddenly realise that the room's gone quiet. And you look up. So not just cutting back to this, but also the gap that precedes it in dialogue, where it drops. And then it makes you kind of, just at the moment where you think what's happening, you cut to it. So it's a great way of emphasizing certain key moments. And if you actually look at the film and just take out the bits where you're seeing them, you'll notice that they are crucial touchstones that were there right at the beginning of the brief.
So let's talk a little while we're on her interview, because it doesn't actually come up very many other times throughout that, because as you say, you only use it for those very key little bits. Let's talk through the interview setup, shall we? I think I've got a picture here of the space that you used when your recce space.
Yeah. So it was important, as I said before, that we weren't falsifying anything. It was important that her, as a service user, we weren't in her home, because if we had gone and interviewed her in her home, she would have been a patient, to my mind, and it would have been more like actual 24 hours in A&E.
Yeah.
And of course, she isn't. She is. We want to allude to that, but we want to actually obviously realise that actually she comes in and she's at the university talking to the students. So it's important that we interview these service users at the university, but that we choose places at the university that could almost be a domestic setting. So we've chosen the staff room here because it has the comfy sofas and it doesn't look like, it does on as a wide shot, but as the interview, just on a sofa with a window behind, it's meant to just kind of slightly nod towards this could be just her bedroom or house or living room or something like that.
And as you say, it fits with your colour theme of the B-roll, which breaks on the normal stereotypes that you would expect. So you've got a really nice, bright, colourful couch. You've got nice, warm bricks behind her. Radiator, obviously.
If you go back to the wide shot, you'll also see the although we only see the brick, the tiles, in fact, behind her, the space as a whole is warm. It's got warm wood floors. You've got those cream and brown tiles. And in fact, the whole campus, so this is a specific campus where they offer all of these health-related degrees, and it is based at an old hospital. So this whole section is part of the old laundry, I think, that was recently redone. So it's nice because it lends a nice authenticity to it, but also it fell within our color palette, which we had storyboarded. We put together a mood board of colors for her. We wanted the sort of autumnal colors, warm colors. Because the thing about autumn when we shot this is, although the colors are warm, which are often nice and positive, there's also that sense of decay and of kind of being broken, because of course the leaves are dying on the trees. So there's a few shots that we linger on, like some plants that are still in flower, but they're just starting to fade. And, as they head into winter, that was the closest we got to that, as I say, cliched raindrops on the window panes moments.
So lighting wise, and this, it does look quite sort of flat. It's it's quite an even contrast ratio on her rather than anything that's too dramatic. Was that on purpose?
Yeah, so that's come about from our research into the documentary 24 Hours in A&E, which was something that came about much earlier in the series of films we made, as I said, and it was about wanting it to feel like a kind of a BBC documentary. So the lighting ratios are quite small for those. It's one of the things that we noticed when we were researching it, was that they're not crunchy 4:1, 8:1 lighting ratios between Key and Phil. They are quite sort of news-ish, 2:1 kind of lighting ratio. So we've actually lit her with a 2:1 lighting ratio and kept it quite bland. So which is unusual, because normally we're trying to do things and light things to look cinematic, which is normally quite contrasty. And here we're actually deliberately doing the opposite to try and make it feel more like a daytime news cruise just popped in her house and shot an interview with her.
I often see people trying to do that on purpose to invoke a bit of trust as well, because it feels more approachable, it feels more realistic and almost rough and ready.
Less staged.
Less staged, less put together on purpose and stylized. You can take that really to extremes. You see this for toothpaste adverts or whatever on TV, where they almost look like they're shot on a phone, really wobbly on purpose, because it's meant to be, here's this real person telling you something. Whereas this is a much subtler way of doing the same thing, where it doesn't feel that there's been any of the artificial aspects of production involved with it.
Yeah. So we've actually let a lot of ambient daylight just kind of fill the space. All we're really doing, just to add a little bit of shape and to give us those ratios, is we've just got a trace frame with some diffusion in it, and we're just putting the LED through it over on the looking room side of the interview. So it's very, very straightforward. It's nothing complicated. No backlights. We're just using the window to kind of naturally
backlight her.
Backlight it.
And because she's got that white radiator behind her, she pops out from the background quite a lot anyway. Okay, so we go on from her interview into the rest of that B-roll sequence you talk about.
Yeah, so as we move into these shots, so this is the second part of that opening sequence. The idea is that we wanted there to be some kind of journey for her, to mimic visual journey, to mimic the emotional journey that she's referencing. And so, as I say, we start very close with her putting on her coat. The second part of that is her going and walking to somewhere. And we then start to bring the camera in wider. So you start to see her either as wide shots or medium shots. And the last part of this sequence was meant to be her then meeting a friend in a cafe for a coffee. And that's all shot very wide. We ended up not using any of that stuff just because it just didn't feel like it was necessary, and like we would have just been cramming it in for the sake of cramming it in. So this is the widest that we kind of see her. So the idea is that the framing was kind of mimicking her coming out of herself as she's talking about getting better. We kind of see a wider frame.
And for anyone who's not familiar with this, by the way, she's throwing a stick off into the water. This is a game we have in the UK called Pooh Sticks, which is based off Winnie the Pooh, A. Milne's books.
Surely everybody knows Pooh Sticks.
I don't know. Do people outside the UK know Pooh Sticks?
If they don't, then we are just two grown men saying Pooh Sticks right now.
Oh dear. So yeah, that's what's going on there, and
So we like this moment came up, which was like, well, what's she doing? We storyboarded that she's just walking, but it became quite apparent very quickly that it was a bit boring just watching her walk constantly. So this was kind of something that we just did on the spur of the moment. We just said, well, look, there's this kind of little bridge here. Why don't we just have you kind of like playing poo sticks or something? Because it's still her on her own. So at this point, she's still talking about being hospitalized and starting that journey of recovery. So we wanted it to still be her on her own, but the framing being wider, the fact that she's smiling, the fact that she kind of moves on and she's going on sort of somewhere else and leaves the frame, is hopefully all part of that.
Yeah, she seems smiley and reflective, but not sort of overly happy.
In fact, I had to direct her to be less happy at one point because she was like,
because you tell people to smile and they go.
Yeah, I was like, when I say smile, I mean like don't frown. It's just kind of, and actually she nailed it in the end, because particularly this frame, I think it shows that there's a kind of a positivity and a kind of maturity about her expression, which has come from her experiences. I mean, as I say, she was only 17 at the time, and I think she was incredibly brave and
absolutely
wise beyond her years.
So I've put this in a little bit. This is one of your behind the scenes shots of your sound guy. Just Alex having some alone time with the river.
So we were using obviously ambience. We do this in most of our productions. We're using ambience from location to integrate and help kind of route the visuals to the dialogue from the interview. And so and we're using a lot of J cuts in the edit. So we're hearing the sound of I think calling it a waterfall is a bit grand. There was a slight drop in the stream. So just that tinkling sound of the water going over the edge.
Probably exactly what you actually wanted for sound rather than an actual waterfall. I think an actual waterfall might have been a bit overpowering.
So you just hear that water just slightly before you then see her walking along the bridge. And that helps connect those visual narratives, because we go from the putting on the coat to seeing the interview to then going back to this going to this walk for the first time. So that ambience is very important editorially, because it helps weave this connection where you're hearing these things and then you're seeing them, and just simple J cuts.
It's something that if you go to any workshop or anything like that, or you go study at university film production and stuff like that, they spend a lot of time talking about exactly this sort of stuff, having not just focusing on the main content, but also having the layers of because I mean all of this sequence was B-roll, but this is almost the C-roll, if you like, of some flowers and those little utility bits where you can just drop them in where needed to help the story flow a bit more. GVs, exactly, general views. And I think it's really nice that you managed to get some of things like flowers which fit the narrative, like you said before, of some sort of the autumnal feel and the wilting flowers, if you like. So we then move to a very different colour palette.
Indeed, yeah, and that was crucial for us when we were storyboarding this, that there was this difference, because there was already an established aesthetic from storyboarding the previous iterations of these films. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to storyboard this stuff for James. We just knew that we would want this look, so this clinical white and blue look. Mm-hmm. Got him in a navy jumper, and it sits completely opposite those warm colours in terms of on the colour wheel. So it's
and it looks just like a hospital. I mean, it looks like you've got hand sanitizer there up on the wall. You've got the metal bit frame that you've pulled in, like you said before. Very much looks like has a hospital feel.
Cut to the BTS, you can see there's a recce photo. So that's almost exactly the same position as well. So with our 85mm lens, we're just getting those paper towels. There's those sinks and soap dispensers on the wall back there. I mean, I don't know why there are so many of them, to be honest. It is a classroom, so why on earth there's like 4 sinks, taps, soaps, and paper towels? I don't know, but
gotta have clean hands.
Yeah. But it is an old hospital, as I said, and they'd only just done that refit at that point, so it fit perfectly with what we wanted to do. Now, the downside of a space like that is, although we've got that big space that helps with the separation that we that we wanted, and shooting at f1.4. That was all fine, but anyone who's shot in spaces like this will know that audio becomes very, very tricky because there's no soft furnishings. It's a large space, loads of hard surfaces. There's the polished concrete floor, and that was very much a case of, we need to film here. We want to film here visually, but do we want to film here audibly? Yeah. So this is actually this is from one of the previous. This was the radiotherapy film that we'd done before this mental health one. And this girl here, Misbah, she was the James student that James plays in the mental health one. She was the equivalent in the radiotherapy film. And the reason I've put this here is this was actually another space that related to that course that she was doing that we were promoting. But it similarly was a very large space with, again, polished concrete floors, no soft furnishings at all. And the what our sound recordist does is he uses these Matthews sound blankets. You can see two of them there, and there's actually a third on the floor in front of her. And we create this kind of phalanx with the two sound blankets with the camera in the middle, and then the sound blankets come out from there, and creating essentially a triangle with her, and then one on the floor. So as she's talking, her voice is hitting those blankets and it's not reflecting off. So you end up kind of killing that echo. It's a very low tech solution, but it means that we can film somewhere where otherwise the sound would have been quite problematic.
Absolutely. And then sound wise, it looks like he's got a lapel on her there as well as a shotgun on a boom. And it looks like that's going through some sort of a wireless transmitter, something like a
Alex
Sennheiser G3.
Does that. He always wirelessly feeds it back. There's he said it just reduces so many issues with cables being around, absolutely, and cable noise, and
and it just makes everyone's life easier, especially when you're trying to navigate around big blankets like that. Just having a big cable going from one thing to another just is a nightmare. Okay, so we move on from his piece to camera to the fake home sort of set, if you like.
The simulation living room.
Simulation living room, that's what you call
there's
it.
Another
not
room.
Fake home set. Is that not the official term, fake home set?
Probably not. There's another room just behind there, which is a simulation bedroom, I think. So we had a kind of a choice, but again, but just talking to the lecturers and the students, saying, well, what would this look like if you were actually on a placement? And he said, well, the thing is, these meetings take place anywhere. It's wherever the patient is most comfortable. So often in their own home, or it could even be neutral ground like
coffee shops
and things. Yeah, somewhere where they're comfortable. But it's normally their home environment. So this is all set up like this anyway for simulating exactly these sorts of scenarios. And then we originally storyboarded that we'd dolly out and you would eventually reveal. So it would be kind of essentially done as a one-er. So he's talking to her, and as you dolly out, you suddenly reveal the big glass wall, and all of the students sat there watching them. But actually the space is way too small, and we weren't able to do that. So in the end, we just did it in the edit. So
this worked as well.
Yeah, we just hear Jane, the lecturer. We hear her say, "Thank you, James." And at the moment where the viewer thinks, who's there, it then cuts to her, to that shot, and then it cuts to the wide shot, to that wide shot. So you essentially reveal, just using, again, J cuts, the transition from...
And really importantly, as he leans back, leaning back to look through the window is such an important visual sort of fit, if you like. And so in terms of filming this, was this all happening? This wasn't a set up environment, was it? This was all happening as an actual class, and you were running around filming it? Or
class. Just because it would be incredibly disruptive if we were filming an actual class. But this is what their classes look like.
Right.
That is his cohort. They're not extras. They're serving the purpose of extras, but they are all doing. And in fact, when we were filming the stuff where they're talking to Jane, they said, what do you want us to do? And they all sort of sat there thinking, we're on camera. I said, well, just pretend it's like a normal class. So in fact, when they're going through all this stuff with Jane, she's like, okay, well, blah, blah, and she just carries on. And then you have to kind of go, actually, guys, can we just go back a little bit? Because I now need to do this from another angle. And you have to remind them that actually now it's not a real class, so it's a difficult line. But a lot of this stuff was meant to be the stuff in the corridor that, as I said, because the gimbal was faulty, we couldn't use. Problem. So we ended up using this stuff more heavily than actually was originally planned. But I think we just about get away with it. There's a few shots in there that I probably wouldn't have stuck in if I'd had a choice, just because they were a bit kind of throwaway at the time. But
sure, but again, as I say, it helps build some of that authenticity. And there's a few real nice touches in here, like her smiling at him as she walks back, and there's some really nice little touches.
Yeah, which was completely unplanned. She just did that, which was really nice. A happy accident.
Very nice. So then we go full circle, like you said at the beginning, and we see the two paths, if you like, connect.
Yeah. So the framing of this is kind of just medium close up, and I'm hand holding the camera. I'm moving between people's shoulders to kind of give that sense of the viewer being in there with them, being, trying to see her, making it look like it's a full classroom, which it was. But partly that's also because we'd slightly run out of locations by this point. So this is actually that exact same space that those last shots you just looked at. We've literally just turned around. So that's exactly the same room. I've just turned the camera around sort of, 45, 90 degrees to the left. So we wanted it to kind of not be, if we had gone any wider, it would have given that game away.
Absolutely. Cool. And then logo to play out. So if we've got any questions now is a great time to leave them there, by the way. But I think the last little bit that would be good to talk about is something about the working with the clients in terms of productions like this. And what I find really interesting with this is that it's repeat work that's not done as one chunk. It's spread out over a good few years. I mean, you said 4 years you've been working with this university. Is that because you take each one as a time and they've gone, that worked really well, let's just do another one next year? Or is that a bit more of a planned out thing where we go, okay, so we've got these ones, rather than let's doing them all as one batch, let's do them, stagger them like this?
Well, I mean, to be honest, there's so much content that the marketing team are putting out. I think they see this style of content is quite distinct. The amount of although the budget wasn't huge by our standards, it was a big chunk of money for them, I'm sure. And so it wasn't something that they could afford to do tons of. So that's partly why it's spread out, I'm sure. But also they're putting out content all the time. And like a lot of clients, some of that's homespun stuff shot on mobiles that their marketing team have just put together. Some of it's cheap and cheerful bits and pieces that are just captured around. And certainly from what we've produced for them, this is the sort of the higher tier of stuff that we do for them. But then I know that they also spend huge sums of money every now and again, every kind of 2 or 3 years, doing commercials that are played in local cinema screens, and I don't believe they're TVCs, but they go out in cinemas particularly, so they're very high quality productions. And I'd love to say that we get brought in to do those, but they do those with a bigger agency, which is fine. In fact, the DP who often works on those is a guy that I've worked with a lot. He's fantastic. So they have different levels of quality of content that they will target in different ways and spend different budgets on. And we're not sort of getting hundreds of thousands of pounds spent on us. We're also not getting kind of a few £100 spent on us. We're in that kind of middle tier. So that just fits as part of their marketing strategy as a strand of video content that they're putting out. But yes, it roughly ends up that we're doing sort of one of those roughly every kind of year or so. You look at their YouTube channel and these stand out. The viewing figures are much higher than those other kind of more throwaway ones. But I think most companies are doing that because they want to hit different points with their marketing. Absolutely. And showcase different elements at different times.
Absolutely. They hit different people and different audience members at different stages of their journey as well, though. Nobody would be watching this as an introduction to UWE as a whole. This is, right, I'm trying to decide to do this course at several different places, or I'm toying between this course and this course. Type.
And I think that's why their marketing team's so big. They have to be very targeted. The demographic they're trying to hit for each one is actually very different. So we filmed their open days. Can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but we filmed. They had a big open day at their main campus, which wasn't this campus, and we ended up using helmet cams and rigs with 11mm ultra wide DSLRs rigged in front of camera operators' faces. We had 2 camera operators, and the story was them arriving. So we had them in the car pulling up with either their mum or a partner, and then getting their lanyard with the welcome and putting it over. So it's all from the point of view of someone who's attended an open day, and they're seeing everything going on. A very different film, very different budget, and sort of very broad in its appeal, because it's just an open day showing a bit of everything that's going on, whereas this is obviously specifically aimed at people that are wanting to do a degree in mental health nursing.
Absolutely, it's all about the story. Right, thank you so much for talking us through that. I think it's a really interesting, it's a very niche project, but I think it's one that has a lot of relevance in a variety of different corporate films, and the core concept of interviews that are carefully chosen and structured for a purpose, brought in with various different types of B-roll and intertwined together to tell a story, is obviously very strong within this one because it's got such a strong message behind it. But that can be taken for any corporate film. So I think it's a really good project to break down. So thank you very much.
Sure, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you everyone very much for watching. We're going to have another one this week with Alistair Chapman talking about Northern Lights and his filming abroad in Norway in some rather extreme conditions. And we will be back next week after that to talk through a bunch more stuff with Ollie as well. So thank you very much, Ollie. And
cheers. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you everyone for watching.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/XSWD.
This stream is powered by Wirecast, a powerful multi-input switching and graphics solution for live streaming in any situation.